Alright, so what we have here is a word problem that's based on a story called Gulliver's Travels. If you've never seen it, but you don't need to see it to understand this. So what we have is we're traveling a certain distance over a period of time. It tells you down here the x-axis stands for hours, but we're not using the letter x, they're using the letter t, because t is what time starts with. And then the y-axis represents your miles traveled. So it says you are supposed to find the distance when x is 2, meaning if you go to 2 hours into the trip, how far have you traveled? So again, because you're given x and you're supposed to find a y value, you want to go right 2, and then you want to either go up or down. Obviously, you're going to have to go up and see how high up you go, which is 4. Right, so d of 2 equals 4, or the distance traveled after 2 hours is 4 miles, is really what that means. All right, we'll do it again here. If you go over to 5 hours and all the way up, you'll be at 11. So d of 5 equals 11. And same thing with the others. If you go to 2.9, somewhere between 2 and 3, really close to 3, and you go up, you're going to have a height of 4. So d of 2.9 is 4 as well. And then last but not least, if you go to 10 on the x-axis, you will be right here, which is a distance of 0. You don't go up at all. So that's just 0. Then we're going to try to switch it. So this time you're finding the value of t that makes this equation true. That means you are finding the times in which 2 miles have been traveled. So in other words, you're finding x when y is 2. So this time you're going to go up to 2 on the y-axis, and you're going to scan left and right. Obviously, we want to go right. And we have not 1, but 2 spots. So if you go up to 2, your first x value will be 1. And if you go over here, your x value is a little between 9 and 10. So we'll say like 9.4 or 9.5-ish. So that one actually has 2 answers. There's 2 times when the height was 2. We'll try it again with 5. So if we go up 5 and we look for intersections, you're going to have 1 and 2. You're going to have 2 intersections. The first one has an x value of 4, and the second one looks to be about halfway between 8 and 9, so that's why I have 8.5. And we'll try it again. This time, what is x, or in this case t, when y is 4? So go up to 4. Now this is interesting. 2 is the first spot that I crisscross at, but you notice like 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.99, 2.56, all the way to 3. Every single number between 2 and 3 will have a height of 4. So everything between 2 and 3 has a height of 4. Well, we can't sit here and write every single number that occurs between 2 and 3, right? I mean, it's time, so you could have decimal time. So what we're going to do is just say to ourselves, anything from 2 to 3 is covered. And then also over here, when x is like maybe 8.8-ish or something like that, it's very close to 9. Now, to write that mathematically, we will use interval notation. So this means anything from 2 to 3, and then 8.8 itself. And then last but not least, we want to know when will our height be 0. So we go to 0 on the y-axis. So we already have a dot right here, but if we look sideways, we'll have another one right here. So there's 2 times when you have a height of 0, and that is 0 and 10. So the last little thing I want to do here is actually put what you just did into words. So you have all of these answers from parts 1 and 2. The first thing I want you to do is write those answers as ordered pairs. So for example, letter A, when x was 2, y was 4. We were asked to find y, and we found 4. So 2, 4 is an ordered pair. In letter B, they were giving you x, which is 5. You found 11, and so on. So then we'll fill in the rest of these here, 2.94, and then 10, 0. And then for part 2, that was when you were back, it was backwards. They gave you y, and you found x. So when y was 2, we had 2 different outcomes for x. When y was 5, we had 2 different outcomes for x, 4 and 8.5, and so on. Now for C, that one's a little interesting because it was like everything between 2 and 3. So we'll just write 2 comma 3 within brackets. That means every number that exists between 2 and 3, and 4, and then 8.8 and 4. And then letter D, there were 2 times when you had a height of 0, which was 0 and 10. So when you are given charts, the easiest thing you can do when it says explain what your answer means is just put words behind your numbers. What does the 2 represent and what does the 4 represent? And this is how you can figure it out. Say to yourself, well, 2 is an x value. The x-axis says hours, so the 2 must be hours, and the 4 must be a distance, which is covered in miles. So 2 hours, 4 miles. Right there it gets you started. And just think, what's happening? Well, we're traveling. So in 2 hours, he was 4 miles from home. It says how far he was from home. In 5 hours, he was 11 miles from home. In 2.9 hours, he was 4 miles from home. About 10 hours. And he was, you can say 0 miles from home, or you can just say he's home. There's no difference between 0 miles from home and being home itself. And the same thing here, except we have 2 times when the distance was 2 miles. So I might switch the way I say it to make it a little easier on myself and say, well, he was 2 miles from home at both 1 and 9.5 hours into his trip. So 1 hour into his trip, he was 2 miles from home, and then he probably came back home. So 9.4 hours, he was 2 miles from home again. And then we just keep going with that. So he was 5 miles from home, both 4 and 8.5 hours into the trip. This one's a little interesting to say. So he was 4 miles away from home anytime between 2 and 3 hours into the trip. So maybe say between 2 and 3 hours he was 4 miles from home, but then he was 4 miles from home again at 8.8 hours into the trip. And then letter D, initially kids will say, well, he was 0 miles from home, 0 hours into the trip, and also 10 hours into the trip. It's kind of silly to say I'm 0 miles from home in 0 hours. So what's really happening is he started his trip from his house. So he left from home, and then if he's 0 miles from home, that means he's back. So he actually came back home in 10 hours. He left home and then he returned. That's what those 0 signifies.